Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. This is a very interesting time in bodybuilding history. We have not seen a dynasty of a multi-time Mr. Olympia champion since the reign of Phil Heath. He won 7 times, but after that, Sean Roden was only allowed to win once, then Brandon could only get 1 Sandow, Big Ramy managed to somehow get 2, and in the past 3 years, we've had 3 new champions. Hadi Chupin in 2022, Derek Lunsford in 2023, and now Samson Dauda in 2024. So what I want to do is compare the past 3 years champions and determine who has been the best one-time Mr. Olympia of the 2020s so far. And I want to give a big shout out to Superset Man. I'm sure you guys know who that is. He made this video possible. Most of the slides you see today will be from Superset Man, and that means yes, he has done this video as well. When you guys are done watching this video, go check his video out and subscribe to both of our channels. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and compare this year's top 3 who now all have Mr. Olympia titles, but using their Olympia winning versions. Here is 2022 Hadi versus 2023 Derek versus 2024 Samson Dauda. If you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Starting in the front double, I see arguments for every competitor. Yes, even my beloved brother Derek. All 3 of these guys have similar strengths and weaknesses. None of these guys have the best separation. Even Hadi, and this was the year he really played the size game to take on Big Ramy, so he lost some of those details. Derek is just naturally kind of smooth, and so is Samson, but honestly he's looking the most separated here. And some of that definitely has to do with lighting. It's so funny how drastically and how up and down the Olympia lighting has gone from year to year, but this is the best we have to go off of. But in addition to poor separation, all these guys have pretty poor arms, but they all have very nice shape, and since shape is subjective, this pose is really close. I do have to put Derek in 3rd though. Maybe it's the lighting, but he has terrible separation. The worst up here, but the best shape though. So honestly, I could still have him in 1st. That's the thing, shape plays a major role in this, so even though I'm placing Derek in 3rd, that doesn't mean he's far away from 1st. All of these guys are really interchangeable, at least in this shot. So for 1st and 2nd, don't rage because this is rage bait, but I'm putting Hadi in 1st, and I'll give you the absolute best reason. I like him more. Samson is better in the legs, but I genuinely like Hadi's torso more. He has the better lats and a tight waist like Samson, but Samson has the more even and clean taper. And in the arms, I can't decide who I like less. Hadi's look weird, but technically peak more. Samson's are a bit more separated, but he has really flat biceps. Like I said, all these placings are really interchangeable. If I said I could have Derek winning here, you know I could also have Samson winning as well. And honestly, if you ask me tomorrow, this shot can definitely change. Now, part of the reason I put Samson in 2nd in the last pose was because of what I'm about to do in the front lat spread. But first off, Derek is in a clear 3rd. But he's been Mr. Olympia since 2023, so we've been talking about him all year, and this pose has been a big topic of discussion, and it's self-explanatory why he's pretty much 4th here, not even 3rd. Anyway, between Samson and Hadi, I'm now flipping this and giving the pose to Samson. Is this a way to kind of balance things out? Sure, but there are plenty of things about Samson that are better in this pose. The legs are better as a whole, and all the upper body peripherals go to him as well. The chest, delts, and arms, especially the chest. And that's basically all we can see since the pics hide the lats of both gentlemen. Honestly, I would say Hadi is just as wide as Samson, just based on what we know, but Samson has the better taper. However, I wish his stomach was a tad more locked in. Not to worry though if you wanted these guys to get a fair shake. Here are some better photos for each of them. And yeah, I'm still pretty split, but I still want to go with Samson. The only thing he doesn't win, oddly enough, are the lats. But his are pretty good, they're wide and taper decent enough. But on top of decent lats, he has the better legs, arms, delts, and pecs. And overall, the size difference is a little too much to overcome for Hadi. I know some people may not like this, it's an uncomfortable truth, but a lot of the time, the threshold for a taller guy to win a pose is lower. We've all heard that adage that a great big man beats a great short guy. That comes up a lot with Samson versus Hadi and Derek. They're like 5'6" max and probably around 240, and Samson is 300 pounds and almost 6 foot. So his shape looks more impressive. He can be less complete and even less detailed and still look impressive and draw your attention on the structure alone. And that's not all he does in this one. He's legitimately more separated in several areas, bigger in just about every single one, and he has great shape. And on top of that, I think it's fair to have these guys split the front poses since they were both so close in either of them. For the side chest, I have to say sorry Superset Man, but I needed a better look, and I included better pics for this pose because this is actually one of the closer ones. In the side leg, all these guys are decent, but you just have to put Derek in 1st for sure. He has good size here, but actual good detail and dryness, which you wouldn't expect based on the rest of his physique. Hadi is in 2nd, then Samson follows as a very close 3rd. Samson is very big, but Hadi's more separated. Honestly, it's 50-50 between these two, but I usually prefer detail. In the midsection, you definitely have to go with Hadi. He's the only one really flexing his abs, and we all know how good his abs are. Samson is keeping it somewhat tight, but the posing execution makes it difficult. He's really leaning back, and Derek is in a distant fourth. Even with his hands covering most of it, we can still see that sogginess and doughiness in the midsection. And in the upper limb, I would have Hadi if not for the big lumps in the delts. The far one isn't even the bad one this time around, it's the front one. He's big and hard throughout the delt and arm, but that lump is a big detraction. And Derek and Samson are basically just the same person when it comes to the upper limb. Both very full in the arm and capped off in the delt. But finally, in the pecs, Derek is last. He has plenty of fullness but no detail, which is typical. But honestly, Samson and Hadi are trading off. Hadi has a little more detail, and Samson has some more fullness. Samson still wins, I'd say, but this is incredibly close. So really, I think at this point we can drop Derek off the pool. Cool side leg, bro, but I just don't like the lack of detail everywhere else, and he doesn't have the impressiveness of Samson either, so although there's not a massive gap, there's still a gap between Hadi, Samson, and then Derek. So third is once again Derek's spot. Between Hadi and Samson though, it's extremely close, which I didn't expect, but it is. Hadi is shorter and more stout. He looks really wide across the shoulders as well. But Samson is just bigger but less detailed. So overall, it's once again 50-50. Hadi has the detail, Samson has the size, but like I said earlier, I usually prefer detail, so I'm going with Hadi. Leave me a comment, I'll be waiting, and no, I'm not explaining it further. Now we have the rear double, and this is very straightforward. Hadi was not in his usual condition back in 2022. Again, he was playing the size game to catch Big Ramy. His back was smooth and it already wasn't great, especially on the detail aspect, and with the subpar conditioning for Hadi standards, his back was as flat as a board. Samson actually places ahead of him for the back alone. There's so much more detail and roundness there, it isn't even close. And Samson holds his own in the lower body, even though Hadi is better. But of course, Derek takes the first place spot here. Even though in this shot he's not flexing the hams the best, we know they're there and his glutes are far and away the sharpest here, so I would say he wins the lower body as a whole. And do I even need to discuss the back? I really don't think so. This photo doesn't really do it justice here. I hate on Derek a lot, but we all know he legitimately has one of the top 5 rear doubles of all time. No one is rushing to say the same thing about Samson yet, or Hadi. So even though Samson kind of looks like he's winning over Derek in these photos, I think we all know who's better. The rear last pair is definitely a lot more competitive than the last back pose. I think all these guys are pretty good. I also see arguments for all of them, but as it stands in this comparison, I think Derek and Hadi's are just a bit stronger. I think Samson would really be benefited on a real stage so he can show off just how wide he is. But for short guys, Derek and Hadi are fairly wide, especially Hadi, and Derek is especially thick. In fact, I see Hadi has the best mix of everything for this pose. His lower body is sharper than Samson's, so he starts out strong. And then in the back, Hadi's so incredibly wide for a short guy. I'm not going to say as wide as Samson, but he's very close. He also has better thickness than Samson. Samson has really pronounced traps, but Hadi has really good traps too, which perfectly tie into his spinal erectors. So overall, I think Hadi has the better back next to Samson, and with the better lower body, I think Hadi is just a bit better than Samson overall. And as for Derek, it's the same things. Derek's lats are really thick, but Hadi is actually wide. Derek also has better glutes, but Hadi has the more defined hams. Now, as for Derek and Samson, we need a closer look. So with this 1v1 comparison, you really begin to understand the sheer size difference that Samson has, and the structural width advantage as well. Honestly though, Derek really does hold his own. He's pretty close with Samson in terms of width. His lats are also much thicker, but Samson has the better traps. Going down to the lower body though, you can see that when Derek flexes his hams, he easily dispatches Samson here. The glutes and hams are no contest, and Derek's quad sweeps are actually good from behind. Overall, I can't have this going to Samson. I see the argument, but from Derek, I get surprisingly similar width, a thicker back, and a much better lower body. So he snags second from Samson here. We're wrapping up on the side shots now, and once again, it's another swing and a miss for brother Derek. The midsection is so soft and puffy, and the pecs droop and look sad. I don't really care how good his side leg may be at this point. Derek completely ruins the pose of his torso, so to third he goes. Now, between Samson and Hadi, I've historically gone back and forth on this one. Sometimes I like the details that Hadi brings. The midsection is great, the pec detail is great, but if he wins this pose, he's not winning on the traditional things, which is usually the way Samson wins. Samson usually wins on being thick from the side, and sometimes he pulls that second element off by looking decently streamlined. So it's a take your pick kind of thing, but since Samson thrives and beats Hadi on the traditional things, I'm leaning more towards him now. Samson's side leg is obviously bigger, and he has decent separation. Hadi definitely wins here though. And in terms of the midsection, I have to be honest, maybe this is a bad photo. Maybe it's because this year was kind of off for Hadi, but his midsection is not how it usually is. It's usually a bit more locked in and even sharper than this. And Samson really stepped up his game in 2024. Compared to what he usually brings, this is a pretty tight waist for him, and the abs are that good type of blocky. Does Hadi still win here? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say yeah, but he is leaving too much on the table here for what should and usually is a slam dunk for him. And then in terms of the entire upper body, Samson sweeps. His pecs are so incredibly thick, and he actually has more detail here than on the side chest if you look closely, and that tricep is pretty crazy, although I wish it was more separated. But Hadi is definitely getting schooled on size here. So overall, it's like I said, Hadi is usually smaller but with more detail, and yeah, that's true this time around. But with Samson being so much bigger in all the important areas, and with him bringing a decent midsection finally, and Hadi slipping up here, that neutral neutralizes Hadi's main selling point and allows Samson to pick up our last side pose. Now we're back to yet another anticlimactic one. Honestly, most of these poses have been pretty easy, and one of the main reasons is present here. What I'm talking about is most of these poses coming down to a binary choice. Derek is not winning this. This is not an ab shot, and we know what his 2023 flexed abs pose look like. Now, in my recent video with Derek, at the 2024 Mr. Olympia, I am going to start and did give him credit for the vacuum. Why? Because unlike 2023, when he hit the vacuum, he hit it after doing the flexed abs and thighs pose for a considerable amount of time. In some rounds of the different callouts, that's all he would do at the 2024 Olympia. So in my opinion, then and only then can a vacuum be counted. And even at that point, it's not for so much because I want to see a developed midsection. This isn't exactly classic. And at the 2023 Olympia, not only did he barely hit the flexed abs variation, but it sucked. So he's getting dead last here. And then we have an easy first, which is of course Hadi Chupin, and that puts Samson in a default but respectable second. Hadi may have been less conditioned in 2022, but that core is still the sharpest up here. His abs are better than Samson's, the waist is tighter, the taper is better, and he basically matches Samson in the quads because Samson's are less defined than Hadi. He has more size though, but both need more separation. For Samson, this was definitely a shot he improved a lot. He had better stomach control and more defined abs, but he's just not Hadi Chupin. I can't think of a time this hasn't been a complete dub for Hadi. He's the best to do it for like 5 years in a row at this point. Actually, he's just one of the best to ever do it, period. And now we've reached the most muscular, our final pose of this comparison. Honestly, all these guys are leaving something or another on the table. Samson is the biggest guy up here and brought more details than usual, but he's still not the sharpest guy. Derek is stout and looks pretty filled in per square inch, but he's completely devoid of any meaningful separation or detail. And that massive void just can't be because of lighting alone. And for Hadi, he actually looks less full and compact than Derek, and his arms and delts look really weird, but he has the best details up here as far as the upper body is concerned. So overall, you're not going to get a stellar pose, and definitely not a perfect one, but overall I think Samson does the most and is the least flawed. For one, he's the biggest overall, and just imagine how this would look in real life. Like, we kind of get the scope of things here, but not the full picture. Samson is at least a half a foot taller than either of these guys, and he has at least maybe 50, 60 pounds on either of them. You can tell how big he is here, but that difference in person must be staggering. And overall, he's complete. He has great quads, a decent midsection, very full pecs, and great arms and delts. The separation is lacking in some areas, but the size isn't, and in some areas like the quads, he actually beats both guys in terms of detail. Like I said, he has the least amount of flaws, and in the most muscular pose, it's hard not to win when you're the most impressive guy. Now, between Derek and Hadi, I hate to make this anticlimactic again, but Derek just falls off here. There's a considerable drop off after Hadi, and it's just because of detail. Yeah, he's fuller and looks to be carrying a little bit more muscle compared to Hadi, but the muscle has zero quality to it. And honestly, if we put a better photo up here, I think it would make Derek's problem worse. A better photo would just really expose how soft he was in some areas. So overall, Hadi edges him out on the sheer detail difference. But as for Hadi versus Samson, this is interesting because I'm usually giving this one to Hadi. I did actually between the 2024 versions, but Hadi is not his normal self here. Usually I'm giving this to him because he looks big enough to let his overwhelming details take over. Well, even though he played the size game in 2022, I think he was actually bigger in 2024, but the details on 2022 were not at all like what we saw at this year's Mr. Olympia. So he's missing both things that usually lead him to a narrow victory here, size and detail. And he also gained a new flaw. What is going on in the delt and arm tie-ins here? Usually I acknowledge that he has skinny forearms and short biceps, which make his entire arm look bad, but now you have that usual issue alongside worse tricep sweep than Hadi has today, and that odd blurriness in that low medial delt area. So once again, Samson wins on size and not having flaws. Hadi was already on thin ice in this pose based on my 2024 Olympia analysis, and he slipped. Alright, now it's time to reveal the scorecard, and I will also compare my results to Superset Man's. To be honest, I didn't watch the whole video. I usually don't when I do collaborations so I don't sway my own results, but I did end up skipping to the end to see who he had in first, second, and third. So if you want the full lowdown on his video, you'll have to go and watch it, but I'll give you the skinny here so you can compare results. Anyway, here's my scorecard. Remember, the lowest score here wins because I ranked them in these poses, and in a pretty distant third was Derek Lunsford. Superset Man and I both agree here, and we only had him winning one pose, which was the rear double. And in my comparison, he was last in all but 2 shots, and those 2 shots were just the back poses. I spent an entire year talking about Derek, so I'm not going to go in depth here, but he's by far the weakest Mr. Olympia out of these 3. He's probably the weakest Mr. Olympia since like a 2007 J or something under those circumstances. He doesn't have good detail, he doesn't have great size because his frame is so small. He has good proportions and a good back, but that is literally it. And in this day and age, great shape is fairly easy to come by. So yeah, let's leave it at that. I'm really beating a dead horse. So that leaves Samson and Hadi, and if you keep Derek on the score sheet, 50-50, Hadi won 4 poses and scored 13 points, and Samson won 3 poses and scored 14 points. Neck and neck. And if you take Derek out of the equation, it becomes a 4-4 split on the mandatories. So it's not just close, it's a tie, which means I have to break the tie with my own opinion. But first, let's at least try to make this somewhat objective. Let's consider the 4 corners of the mandatories. 2 front shots, 2 side shots, 2 back poses, and the abs and thighs and most muscular poses as kind of bonus shots. In terms of those 2 front shots, both of those can go either way, so they're 50-50 there. I legit had those poses split. Then in the side shots, I did have those split as well, but I think if you averaged both shots together, Samson would have just the slightly better average. Basically, I think he was stronger across both poses even though he lost one of them. And really, that was probably bullshit to most of you. So yeah, Samson is better from the side as a whole. He's the bigger guy and much thicker, it makes sense. Now from the back, it's again really close, but if you average both poses together, I would once again have Samson slightly ahead. He definitely beat Hadi in the rear double, and yes, Hadi was first in the rear lat spread and Samson was third, but in the rear double, Hadi was third and Samson was only second. But Derek was in these poses, so it threw them off. Go back and look though, Samson's win in the rear double was much stronger than Hadi's was in the rear lat spread. Remember, I said all those guys in the rear lat spread had good poses. So once again, overall, Samson is stronger from the rear. And what about the 2 bonus front shots? Well, the abs and thighs pulls a ton of weight here for Hadi, and he won that by more than Samson won the most muscular. So sure, Hadi has the great average in these bonus poses, which means that from the front, the bonus front, the side, and the back, these guys are once again split. We're just going in circles at this point, but now that we've fleshed it out a bit, I feel a bit more comfortable calling this one for Samson, which Superset Man did as well, but here are my reasonings. And keep in mind, I had Hadi beating Samson at this year's Mr. Olympia as my own personal choice. But with this 2022 version of Hadi, it's just not getting the job done. It was close this year in 2024, razor thin both according to the judges and in my own opinion. So when using an inferior version of Hadi, it stands to reason that he was going to lose anyway. But it was still close. Here's the issue though, the main reason I had him winning this year was because of conditioning, and he was able to hold his own from the side and in the most muscular and from the back. In 2022, like I said, he came in fuller. I don't want to say he came in off because I do believe this fuller look was intentional, and it was the correct move for the time. He obviously won the Mr. Olympia, beating his main competition, Big Ramy, who was way down in 5th. But would this have been the correct move for going up the 2024 version of Samson? No. Hadi really needs to expose Samson in the detail department and be just as complete. Hadi lost the rear double by a lot with this version. He lost the most muscular, which is not normal. The side tricep is usually not a loss for him at this point, and the rear lat spread was not as resounding as it was this year. Overall, he's actually slightly bigger now and more conditioned, so this 2022 version is just inferior all around. Yes, it's still close, he's still pretty complete and has great detail from the front, but he needs to overcompensate in a lot of these areas to take on a giant like Samson. And that's the other thing. On a real stage, Samson would just be too much. He's too much for anyone in this current period if he's in good enough condition. The shape on him looks even more impressive because it's not a small guy with shape, it's a huge 300-pound bodybuilder with shape. And Hadi didn't expose the flaws in conditioning enough with this version. On a real stage, and even in this comparison, Samson, since he was good enough in condition and because Hadi didn't do enough, was just too much for the Persian Wolf to handle. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What do you guys think? Who was the best one-time Mr. Olympia of the 2020s so far? I usually have Hadi beating Samson. I have 3 times this year, but with these versions, not so much. Let me know who you think the winner is down in the comments. And be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. And be sure to subscribe to Superset Man's channel as well. Of course, I want to thank him once again. And if you want to support my channel even further and get your grubby mitts on some high-quality supplements, be sure to head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexia.